Welcome to the Hanley Effect, a podcast by the Hanley Foundation designed to educate, change minds, and save lives. Our goal is to inspire you, showcase our innovations, and change the conversation about addiction and mental health. Join us as we unravel stories of resilience, recovery, and hope.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Hanley Effect. I'm John Dybin.
I'm Rachel Dosigal.
And
hey.
Hello, Dr. D. How are you?
Hello, Dr. D. You weren't going to say hi to me?
Of course I was.
Oh, my
I
gosh.
just was giving
I'm
you a little...
offended.
So I've already messed it all up. And so, you can't see our guest yet, but we can see our guest, and she's just shaking her head.
Laughing.
No, I'm kidding.
We try to bring the levity.
We do. We have fun.
We do.
I am going to tell everybody what I said. I really like that shirt. I think it
Thank you.
brings out your eyes, and I'm
Thank
painfully
you.
male, so I never notice those things.
Okay.
So it's very cool.
So I'm just wondering, since we're bringing up attire, have our guests noticed that John is always in the same outfit? And if you're all ever wondering, does he wear this exact same thing to work every day? Yes, he does. How many blue jackets, how many white shirts, and how many pairs of blue jeans do you own, sir?
I would like to say that I have 7 white shirts.
Okay.
I have 2 pairs of blue jeans.
Okay.
I have 1 blue jacket, but I would like to say also that I split it. I also have a gray and a black.
That's true.
So sometimes I mix it up.
That's true. Depending on the bow tie.
And if I have a bow tie, that's true.
Have a bow tie.
Next week I'll wear a bow tie.
Okay. All right. Good.
But for today, we've got much more important things to talk about.
Much more.
And we've got a guest to talk about. I love starting out just having fun and just being real and being us, because we've got a guest who's going to talk about a pretty serious topic and something that affects a lot of people. But she spends a lot of time helping people have the conversation.
Yes.
And the word is normalizing.
Yes.
And so we want to talk about normalizing conversations that we have to have. And our guest today is Lisa Sugarman. And I want to read a few things about her and really have her tell more about herself. But Lisa has experienced suicide. She's 3 times in her own life she has experienced that phenomenon, and she's going to talk to us about it and how to talk about it. But she's also doing a lot of things with her life, and one of the things that I want to talk about is she is a storyteller with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. It's an amazing group. But we just want to stop talking now and welcome and get to know our guest. We want to say welcome, Lisa.
Welcome, Lisa. So glad you're here.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate just the chance to be here, the chance to chat and to have this conversation. This is the conversation I think everybody needs to be having. So I appreciate that we get to do it today.
When I read your bio and read about what you're doing, that word normalize is so important to me as a mental health professional, and I'd love for you to talk about what that means to you, especially in when it comes to conversations about suicide and living beyond them. But would you just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and whatever you'll share about your journey that brought you here?
I'd love to do that. I appreciate the question and again, just the chance to be here to have the conversation. So I'm here just outside of Boston, just north of Boston, where I've been most of my life. Grew up in a little harbor town just north of the city, raised our kids. I have 2 grown daughters, 27 and 24. Been married to the same great guy since, God, we were 17 years old when we started dating. So we've been together for a long time. Yeah. And I mean, I've been a content creator forever, but the content that I create now is just very, very different from what I had created before. I was writing parenting books for many, many years, probably close to a decade or more, and really kind of focused my life and my work in that space. And part of my story that I'm sure we'll chat about today has to do with discovering that my father had taken his life 35 years after his death. So that really just kind of shifted everything that I was doing and put me very unexpectedly in the mental health space and kind of gave me I guess, gave me the role of an advocate very unintentionally. It was just something that happened as a result of really just kind of exploding into this new narrative of my life. I thought my dad had died of a heart attack, and now all of a sudden I was a suicide loss survivor. I had lost someone else to suicide when I was only 9 years old, a cousin of mine, and then most recently 4 years ago lost another close childhood friend. So all of those losses just really shifted everything in me about 10 or 11 years ago. And I've been in this space creating a different kind of content, really just kind of elevating the conversation about suicide and mental illness. And you use the word normalizing, which is a word that I use a lot because it's something that I think we all just really have to do. It's we've lived in a culture for too long where we're taught not to talk about the things that are taboo, things like mental illness and things like suicide and even things like grief and loss. And we can't subscribe to that belief system anymore. We can't be hiding these experiences and these feelings and these stories, and we have to be bringing them into the mainstream, because if we can't talk about it, then people aren't going to be sharing about it, and we're not going to know who's suffering and who's not. So I think that's probably the longer winded version of just who I am and how I went from, doing parenting work to being in this space. And I can't imagine being in any other space at this point.
Go ahead.
Lisa, as I listen to you give the intro, the piece that I'm really, really curious about is what propelled you forward. So when learning about your father dying by suicide is one thing. I think a lot of people would say, oh, I need to deal with that grief, or I need to deal with that situation. And really what this did was it caused you to pivot and really change your life's path forward. Will you talk a little bit about that, and how old were you when that happened?
Sure. So, well, let's keep one thing in mind. One thing that's worth clarifying is that I didn't move forward right away. When I learned this, so I was 10 years old when my father passed away initially. He was a healthy, fit man, but he was also a smoker. And back in the late 1970s, like, people didn't connect those dots. So he was, for all intents and purposes, a healthy guy and very active. And then all of a sudden he wasn't there. But saying that he had died of a heart attack was not something that was a stretch for me, because I knew that heart disease was on my father's side of the family. I knew that my dad smoked. So there was never a reason to question it. So I went through my life for 35 years until I was 45 years old, the same age that he was when he passed away. And I believed he had died of a heart attack. And then only 11 years ago, I learned that truth, which I'm happy to talk about that part of the story too. But it was very much a by accident kind of discovery. I was not expected to find out the truth. And I would say the first 3 years, conservatively, the first 3 years after learning that truth, I froze. I really, everything just stopped for me. I think the best way to say it is that I was living two very parallel lives. I was raising my kids. We were kind of in the thick of it. Our kids were tweens at that time. We had been married for 20 years. I was working. We had a busy, full life. And I was very much mom and working in the school system and doing all the things in my outward facing life. And in my bedroom with my husband, Dave, for 3 years, I think I sobbed myself to sleep. I was a very, very different person behind closed doors. And so everything really just shut down for me. I think what ultimately was the catalyst for me, even just like starting to talk about it, was believing that my children, so after a few years had gone by and I had really just, you never really get your bearings, but I was trying to just process, trying to just kind of assimilate everything. And when I finally did, it was important to me to talk to our girls and explain to them what this truth was, and what, because we all have this inherited trauma, we all have inherited DNA. And it's very possible that the DNA carries through to the next generation and so on. And our girls were at that age. They were like going into high school, and that's usually when mental health issues start to emerge. And right on cue with my kids, they really did. They both have had issues with a little bit of anxiety and depression. I just felt it was important to talk to them, and I did. And once it was out to them, and once it was out kind of to the family and friends in my immediate orbit, then I really just couldn't stop talking about it. I was invited on one podcast,
Wow.
to share my story, and I have not stopped since. And it's really just been such a byproduct, such a beautiful byproduct of sharing the story, that I've been able to go on platforms like yours and go on so many others to really just have this conversation and to put all of what's been kept so secretive just out into the world to have normal conversations. So I guess that's the best answer I can come up with in terms of what was the catalyst. It was just telling my kids and starting to share and not stopping.
Oh, those are huge things. First of all, I was that first few years I was frozen.
Yeah.
I think that is so powerful for me to hear. I think for anyone to hear, because we see, people will see and they'll hear you in this time of doing, fully engaged in your mission, and it's so powerful sometimes for those who are in that 3 years right now, in that period right now,
Validating.
to know, man, you know what? There isn't some linear, clear progression there. Sometimes you freeze for a bit. And I love that.
Yeah.
But that what it was you moved into mission simply because you had one little part of the mission that you had to do. You had to tell your kids. And once you started, it sounds like, moving in that direction, the floodgates opened up.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I mean, honestly, that's the best way to say it, because that's exactly what happened. And recognizing the kind of value that my story had for people who were hearing it, whether they were survivors like I am, and they were on just a different part of their journey, their continuum, because it's, you could be finding someone who's a month out from their loss, or 2 years, or 10 years. And it really doesn't matter, because grief is so cyclical. But there is a process. There is kind of a path that people tend to follow. When in the beginning, it's awful. It's all awful. And over time, you sort of integrate that loss. You're never over it. You're never ever over it. But you integrate that loss into your life, and you learn to live within that balance, and that grief and loss can exist with joy and with happiness. And that was kind of what I did. But it was seeing the impact that just sharing my own experience had on other people. That's what kind of just, kept me moving forward, and realizing that, being of service in that way was really, I think for me, it was honestly the best way that I could honor my dad, honor his legacy, honor my own grief, and make no mistake, it's incredibly cathartic for me just to have these conversations. I'm obviously doing it with the purpose of serving other people, and that's a beautiful, I guess, secondary reason for having these conversations. But for me, it's also personal. I get a lot out of just being able to talk about it openly.
So I'm curious about, you talk about grief and loss, and when I hear your story, I'm thinking about this grief and loss in a couple of ways. So I'm thinking about this loss of your dad, and what you thought happened versus what did. But I'm wondering about the trusted adults who must have told you that your dad died by a heart attack versus by suicide. And I'm wondering about the loss of at least an element of the trust in the relationships, that you realize you were deceived.
It's interesting. So I'm going to focus on the word deceived for a second. So the person that we're really talking about is my mom, who fortunately is still very much here and well. And, we talk probably 5 times a day. She's down in Florida. I'm here in Boston. So I'm very, very lucky that we have an unbelievably close relationship. And it, when I think back to that time, I was a 10-year-old kid, and a little bit more context to understand the relationship I had with my dad is that my dad was my person. I was a tomboy. We did everything together. I was like his little sidekick, and his death was as traumatic as you could imagine a child losing a parent's death would be. So in that moment, when my mother found him and learned that it was a suicide, I wasn't there. I was at day camp for the day. When she found him, and he did leave a note, so it was very obvious what had happened, she made a very, very conscious decision in that moment. She knew that when I came off the bus in 5 hours, I wasn't going to have a father to come home to. I would never be the same. Our family unit would never be the same. My life would never be the same. My mother couldn't imagine giving me that news and then layering a suicide on top of that. It was a 10-year-old kid at a time in the world where people were not talking about mental illness. People were not talking about suicide. Right. There weren't support groups for kids. There were barely support groups for adults. And so in that moment, she decided to keep that from me, to shield that from me, and to give me a different narrative. And honestly, I don't feel deceived at all. I mean, having found, now look, I don't know how I may have felt if I had known the truth 45 years ago, but I do know as a grown woman, I was 45 myself when I learned this truth. I was already a mother. I had been married for over 20 years. I had a completely different perspective. So when I learned that she had kept that from me, I felt in that moment, and have felt ever since that moment, nothing but gratitude. I understand that my mother had to change the story, and that when you whittle it down, it was, she had to lie to me to protect me, but that's what she did. And that's why she did it. And I don't know how I would have possibly navigated knowing that he had died that way, because in my own little 10-year-old brain, through no fault of anyone else's, I always believed suicide was a selfish act, which is a very common belief system. I don't feel that way anymore.
Sure. Of course.
But can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that that's still part of the narrative. Why, how do you move to a place from thinking it's a selfish act, which we hear in our culture, and we hear
all the time,
to something different. Can you talk a little bit about that movement?
Yeah, for me, it was a very, very sudden revelation, and connecting those dots was not very hard for me at the time. I had just never really had an experience that would cause me to really think it through. So when I found out about my father's suicide, one of the things I've always, just my nature, I've always been kind of a seeker. I've always tried to understand things, whatever the things might have been. So when I found out, I had the benefit of being in a world that was surrounded by technology. So I'm out there watching videos, and I'm out there researching everything I can possibly research and take in about suicide and mental illness, and what is that mindset like. And it was in doing that I really realized for the first time as a grown adult that mental illness is an illness. It's an illness like a cancer, like a heart disease, like any other kind of an illness that needs to be treated, that needs to be acknowledged for what it is. And I think it was really almost an overnight shift for me, because once I internalized that, and I understood that when someone's in that state of mind, when they're completely desperate and hopeless, and whatever the reason is, that's their belief that that's the only way out, they're not thinking about who they're leaving behind. They're not thinking about what kind of damage or impact it's going to have on family or friends or colleagues or the world at large. They're just thinking about, I need the pain that I'm in to stop. And once I realized that, once I really understood that from the perspective of now being a survivor of that kind of loss, everything shifted for me. And there was no blame. There is no blame to attach to someone, because I would imagine that if you're suffering with cancer, you're suffering with some kind of a terminal disease, you want that to end. That's your number one priority. And most people, I would imagine, would do anything they could possibly do toward that end. And so how could we possibly feel like someone is being selfish when all they're trying to do is end the pain that they're in? And of course, then, we get into the whole piece about, depression hijacks your sensibilities and you can't think rationally. And so there are so many other factors that are involved. But I mean, basic and simple terms, I realized there was nothing that my father did that was selfish. He just was too ill to get help in a time in the world when help just wasn't mainstream, and it was just too late for him.
The way that you have just articulated this, I wish that we could blast this across the U.S.
Let's do it. Actually,
let's do it.
Right.
I mean, that is so powerful and so succinct. And, if more people could just understand the concepts that you so simply articulated, the stigma, the understanding, it really would be changed.
I think so. I believe so. And you said something else that's just so true. It's so simple. And that to me was a little dumbfounding for me, that it was that simple, that I could have that kind of a mind shift so suddenly and so completely. But once I really understood what mental illness was and what depression really can create and what the suicidal mind is really thinking as best we know it, then it's like there is no other way to think about it. Then you understand that somebody's like suffering and they want the suffering to stop, and they're not thinking about any of those other external things that somebody else would think about. And unfortunately, it is as simple as that. And having these kinds of conversations to just kind of, chip away at that stigma is how we do it. It's organically. It's like this.
I have one more question for her, if you don't mind. Did your mom re-grieve with you?
So that's been an interesting experience. Yes. Yeah. The answer to that is definitely, because keep in mind, or actually maybe this is something that we haven't touched on yet. So when my father passed away and my mother found this note and understood that it was a suicide, I was not there. I was there later in the day, but my grandmother and two of my aunts came to the house immediately to just help support my mother in that moment as she's kind of navigating all of these things that had to be done before I walked in the door. And my mother never spoke a word of my father's suicide to a living soul. It was acknowledged that day in that moment, really mainly just with my grandmother, kind of, what do I do? And my grandmother just said, you have to do what you believe in your heart you need to do for you and for Lisa. And that was when my mother made the decision. When she told me it was a suicide, everyone kind of followed suit. Another word was never mentioned. She never spoke about it publicly, never spoke about it privately. She kept that for 35 years. So she certainly grieved along with me that we lost my father, but she was in tandem with that, grieving the fact that her husband had taken his life and she had no one else to grieve that with. So one of the most beautiful, if you can say that it's beautiful, parts of me discovering this, one of the things I'm most grateful for, let's put it that way, is that after 35 years of my mother having to deal with these emotions and these thoughts and all of this type of grief alone, I get to support her. I get to be there with her. I get to talk her. I know it's hard for me to even say it without tearing up myself.
I mean, but that's unbelievable.
So let's put it this way. Since it came out, it's been just about 11 years since the truth came out. My mom and I have been in what you would call an 11-year long extended conversation that I imagine will never, ever end. We have talked about every aspect of this. My mother has been a guest with me on podcasts talking about this. I have a new book that's coming out that's about this story. It's about losing my dad twice. And my mother's voice will be in that book. Not a lot of people know that yet, but the manuscript is being edited right now. My mom's voice is injected into that book. So we do a lot of grieving together. And I just know that we're both extremely grateful that we can do that now, that we do have that open communication. And I'm just happy that she can let all of this out into the open.
That's so amazing. Glad you asked that. Yeah. There's that great myth that keeps us sick and hurting, that myth that time heals all wounds, which is the great lie that we believe. And I think that's just a perfect picture of your mom, having to hold on and have that wound untreated, because time can help heal treated wounds, but when they're left untreated and unspoken and unaddressed, and that's such a beautiful picture. Can you, just for us and for our listeners, can you tell us what is the name of your book going to be?
Yeah.
Well, so I think I do. Well, I'm not allowed to say. So okay. my publisher, let's put it this way. It is about surviving.
Let's put it this way.
Air quotes.
I am setting a Google alert for Lisa Sugarman.
I appreciate that.
And we would love to have you back when the book comes out.
I would love to come back. The book will be out. I imagine that I believe the pre-copies should be out around Christmas time, around the new year, advance copies for press and things like that. So titles will be coming soon. Book covers will be coming soon. It's in editorial. With my publisher is working fast and furiously to try and pull all this together. So no, I would love to come back, but the gist of it, and it's going to be a little bit different than just a straight memoir. It definitely will have a big memoir component to it, but I know that we're probably going to talk a little bit about the Help Hub, which is the platform that I founded last year. That will also be distilled down into the book as well, and as well as a toolkit, whole huge extensive toolkit for grief and loss and self-regulation and mindfulness and how to have conversations about someone not being okay. All sorts of tools that people can take advantage of will also be in there as well. So it's going to be something very unique.
That's exciting.
That is
yeah.
exciting.
What is the Help Hub? Yeah. What are you talking about?
So the Help Hub is a platform that I started very unintentionally as a result of a lot of the work that I do volunteering for an organization called the Trevor Project. So the Trevor Project is the largest LGBTQ focused crisis and support hotline for at-risk LGBTQ youth. And I've been a counselor on their lifelines for just about 3 years. So I'm hotline number, people who are dealing with everything from suicidal ideation to homelessness or coming out or abuse. And in that role, one of the biggest things that we do is hold space for people who are calling, who are in varieties of crisis. But another thing that we do a lot of is providing resources to help people help themselves. And so I've had the benefit of being involved on this platform for a long time, and I've accumulated all these resources. And so on my own website, which really just kind of was a clearinghouse for all of the content that I've created over the years, I started developing a resource page because I felt it was important to put resources out into the world. The more of us who do that, the more people we can impact.
That's right.
So I ended up with this crazy, long, unwieldy, ridiculous list of, it was like 12 miles long of organizations that had no structure, no format, nothing. And I knew that all of these resources were so relevant and so timely. So I kind of took a step back from it last year, probably around last fall. And I realized that what it needed was some structure, and the structure it needed was kind of by community. So resources for the LGBTQ community, resources for the BIPOC community, resources for veterans, for the elderly, for the Latinx community, because we all go through such similar situations with grief, loss, depression, suicide, all of these issues that affect any of us, affect us regardless of what community we're in. But the way that we deal with those things is very different depending on what community we're in. And so somebody in the BIPOC community might need something very different to support their mental health than someone in the Asian community, and so on. So I broke it apart into a grid of 16 categories, and I did a ton of work for about a year developing and vetting all of these resources. And I realized that that needed to be my website. That's what I wanted my website to be. And I just ultimately rebranded the entire thing as the Help Hub. And I created and curated all of these resources, these PDF files and documents that people can download and share that, like we talked about, that have, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercises, or exercises if you're grieving, or what not to say to someone who has just lost someone they love, just general resources. And I create a lot of short form video content as well. I also have a podcast called The Survivors. So all of these things now funnel into this new platform called the Help Hub. And I continue to build it and add to it as often as I can.
How can people find it?
They can go to thehelphub.co. And when you're there, the Help Hub has its own YouTube channel that filters in. It has a super extensive archive and library of all of the content. I wrote columns for many, many years. So all of the columns and articles are there, as well as toolkits. My podcast filters into that. The books I've written, everything I do is up there. But the primary purpose of the Help Hub is to give people free, always free. I never want there to be any kind of a barrier to someone getting the help and the resources that they need. So you'll have this free hub of resources, as well as all the tools that are up there as well. And people can come and go and share and bookmark and download whatever it is that they need whenever they need it most.
I love it.
So good.
So
I want to just ask one more question.
You know where I'm going.
Oh, I know. But I want to hear about your work with NAMI, because we at Hanley work with NAMI as well. We have a chapter that is really close to us on the same campus as St. Mary's Medical Center. So you are across the country from us, up in the Boston area. So tell us the work, a little bit about the work that you're doing with them.
So you said it earlier, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they are a great grassroots organization that really is all about educating people on everything from mental illness to suicide. And there's a huge storytelling component. So there are hundreds of NAMI chapters all over the country. We have a very, very active chapter here in Boston and on the North Shore of Boston, where I am. And so I'm affiliated here with my Boston area chapter as a part of their storyteller program. And that involves not just people who have lived experience with suicide like I do, but it's also people who maybe you're a caregiver for someone who has experienced mental illness, or you're somehow involved, and maybe you've got some relationship with someone who is dealing with addiction. Like, there are so many different roles that we all can take on in our life. And so the storyteller program is designed to teach people like me who have a story to share, how to share that story to first responders, to civic organizations, to schools, to just really educate people and help people understand what it's like to be a survivor, what I went through, what my family has gone through, what kind of obstacles there are, what kind of resources there are. So we go around and it's by the way, anyone listening, if you have a school system or a civic organization in your community and you would like to bring a storyteller in, these programs are free. NAMI will come in and they will create a program for you for free, and typically two speakers will come in, and people have very different stories, and we share for about an hour. We let you know what our own lived experience was and how we navigated it, or how we continue to navigate it. And it's really just a big open Q&A at the end for people to really just ask the questions that don't often get asked, just to really get that information that isn't always mainstream. So I've been doing it. This is my second year as a storyteller, and it's just been such a beautiful experience. I speak a lot to crisis intervention teams, and these are the first responders who are kind of in dealing with these situations, and they don't always know the perspective of the families. And so we give a lot of insight that they wouldn't normally get. So
NAMI
very,
is incredible.
they
They are
are.
just
Yeah.
an amazing organization.
And if anybody
Yeah,
wants
they
to find out about them, they're nami.org,
Yeah.
nami.org. Another great place for resources.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is
Yes.
always my job to wrap things up and to know when we're coming. Again, we could talk forever.
For
Thank you
hours.
so much for
Oh.
being
Lisa,
here.
you're extraordinary.
Oh, well, thank you. I
We
appreciate
like
that.
to
I
take
really do.
our last few minutes and give you kind of hear from you. And I've been thinking as we're talking about, the people who are listening, everybody who's listening, somehow, one way or another, is touched by this. But I'm thinking about people, especially, what would you want to say, to someone who is suffering and is struggling right now, and is hurting because of suicide from someone they loved, and they've lost someone, and they're in the struggle? What would you say to a person in the struggle? And what would you want them to hear? And then what would you want somebody who's near them, who could be a support to them? What would you want them to hear?
So I think for the people who are listening who are struggling, and there are a lot of us out there, I can't imagine that in one way or another, we're all not dealing with something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in that place where you're feeling hopeless, or you're feeling alone, or you're feeling desperate, number one, and most importantly, you're not alone. And I know a lot of people might argue that and say, well, I don't have anyone. I don't have a partner or a spouse, or I'm not connected with my family, or I don't have a friend support system. And that all may be true, but you're still not alone, because there are organizations like the Trevor Project, like the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, like Samaritans, like NAMI, who are out there, who have crisis lifelines that are available 24/7, where people like me are trained to listen and hold space, to give you resources, to de-escalate you, to help you with a safety plan. So even if you're feeling like there is absolutely no one that you can turn to who can understand and who can help, there actually is. And all you have to do is pick up the phone. You just call 988 anytime, day or night, any day of the week, and someone will be there on the other end to talk you through it, to work with you, to get you the help that you need. So that's what I would say to someone who's feeling desperate like that. And also, one other thing, and this is really, I think, important: the way that you're feeling right now is not always the way that you're going to feel. There's another side to it. And so often we get so bogged down in those momentary feelings of desperation or crisis or hopelessness that we can't see that tomorrow may feel a little better, or the next day or the next week may feel better. So just remember that how you're feeling right now is not the way you'll always feel. And the second part of your question, I think, was how do you handle it if you're wanting to support someone who is struggling? The best thing in the world that any of us can do is to hold space. And I want to make it very, very clear: whether you are a therapist, a counselor, a partner, you're someone in the medical profession, it is not your job to fix the person's problem. We wish we could. We all wish that we could, but the reality is it's not our job to fix it. What we do have to do is be there to support each other. And when we do that, it can be as simple as just sitting down and saying, hey, just like, I'm here. Talk to me. I want to know. I want to hold the space for you. I want to help you get a therapist if you don't have one. I want to help you reach out to the 988 Crisis Lifeline. Having that in your pocket as a person who's trying to help someone in crisis is the best tool that you have at your disposal. So keep that on your brain, keep it in your phone. And when you want to help someone in crisis, be there to listen, and then encourage them to seek help, either by calling 988 or talking to a therapist.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Lisa, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time and the work
You're
you
so
do.
welcome.
I cannot wait to have you back. I know we both can't. To have you back after the book's been published and we can talk about it. Thank you so much. Dr. D,
Dr. D.
thank you so much.
Thank
Love spending
you.
time with you as always.
As always.
And to everyone who's listening or watching, thank you so much for being here. Remember that 988 for people in crisis, and we'll see you next time on The Hanley Effect.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for the Hanley Effect. To learn more about our programs, visit hanleyfoundation.org or call 844-502-4673.